Skull Rock Podcast is brought to you by the generosity of the following companies. The Old Mill Press, publishing beautifully crafted books that illuminate our world. To learn more, visit theoldmillpress.com. And by listeners like you.
Skull Rock Podcast is thrilled to announce that we are now on Patreon. Dive deeper into the world of animation, films, and behind-the-scenes stories with your hosts Al John Go and Dave Bossert. Not only will you be helping to keep the magic alive, but will be part of our special community. We want to thank friend of the show, Joshua Volkert, as well as Skull Rock crew members, Steve Minch and Chris Banis for their support. If you would like to join our Skull Rock crew, please visit our Patreon link in our show notes or visit patreon.com/Skull Rock Podcast. Thank you for listening and for your continued support of everything we do.
Hi, this is Kirk Hansen, story artist, writer, designer, art director, and you're listening to me on the Skull Rock Podcast.
Boom.
And they said he can't take direction.
You can. You can.
Aye, mateys, remember this as the day you sailed with the Skull Rock Podcast. Proceed at your own risk and mark well me words, mateys. Dead men tell no tale.
Welcome to yet another edition of Skull Rock Podcast, the show about all things Disney and pop culture. Every week we take you behind the scenes of some of your favorite Disney films, theme park attractions, performances, books, music, as well as what's streaming, what's in theaters, and what's going on in this universe of entertainment. I'm Al John Go, lifelong Disney, Marvel, Star Wars fan and musician and pop culturist. And you can email me, Aljon, ALJON, at skullrockpodcast.com.
I'm Dave Bossert, artist, filmmaker, author, and welcome to the Skull Rock Podcast. If you love Disney and pop culture, please subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can also like and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And you can also email me at dave@skullrockpodcast.com.
Thank you to Virtual Dave. We're holding down the fort while he's out of town, but we have another truncated episode for you this week. We're going to get right down to it. Part 3 of an amazing interview with story artist Robert Lence. Sit back and relax and enjoy this interview right here on Skull Rock Podcast.
Skull Rock Podcast. Interview time.
Well, Aljon, we're back again for part 3 with Robert Lence, story artist extraordinaire. Robert, welcome back to the Skull Rock Podcast.
Thanks very much for having me, Dave and Aljon. Very glad to be back.
Well, we left off last week, Robert. You had talked about being over at DreamWorks and working on Shrek before there was even a DreamWorks campus, when you were at the Amblin offices, and you told us some great stories about Chris Farley, and we kind of ended with you talking about Don Rickles on the recording session for Toy Story with Don Rickles, and I guess we should probably pick up you coming back to Disney.
Yes. Okay, so we'll start there. After I left DreamWorks and Shrek in, I believe it was in 1998, I came back to Disney for sort of like my second stint at Disney. I'd started there as an intern in 1988, so that was like 10 years later. I left, I think, like in 1992. So it was great to be back. The main difference was when I was there the first time, as you remember and know, Dave, we were in very humble offices on Flower Street and sort of converted warehouse space and everything. However, with the success of Lion King, they went ahead and built that big, beautiful, Disney's Mickey's Hat building and welcomed us back to the main lot. So that was the main difference. We were now back on the main lot in Burbank.
Well, I would argue that we were main lot adjacent.
Right. Across the street from the main lot. Right? That's true. It was also the original site for Disneyland. Have you talked about it?
Yeah, that's right. When Walt first started toying around with the idea of building a Disneyland, he thought, he would just use those couple of acres that were on the other side of Riverside Drive from the main studio lot.
And I think some of the making of books or making of Disneyland books have drawings of that, like the original concept. And right, it was a very sort of humble space. It's not a lot of space. And then quickly the idea outgrew the space, and that's when he bought the land in Anaheim.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But those drawings do exist. I know I've seen them in some Imagineering books. So back on the main lot, it's nice to be at least a main lot adjacent. And so that was nice, and to be in, the big, beautiful hat building and everything. And that came about, I think the point I would want to make too is I tell my students this too. After I initially got hired by Disney as an intern in 1988, based largely on the strength of my student film and probably partially my portfolio, I don't think I ever got hired by portfolio again. It
Yeah,
was
you mentioned that at the end of our last episode, and talk a little bit about that, because I think it's important for those who are breaking into the business to understand how that works, because it really boils down to just networking and working with people and staying in touch with colleagues, right?
very, very true, Dave. It's a business of connections. And, it is, it's hard to get hired by portfolio. It's good, when your work speaks for itself, and it's something to be said about that. But it is a business of connections. And, every other time I got hired, the story was the same. It was like a friend of mine is being made director, and he or she is going to hire me on their project. I'm talking to them, I'm having lunch with them socially, and they go, "Oh, I'm going to be directing this new film coming up. Why don't you come over and check us out and see what we're doing?" So they're very much a business of connections and relationships. So you want to really nurture and build those relationships even early on. Work leads to work. You
And
get hired on one
and
project.
it's all friendships.
Yes, it's right, definitely. And the
Yeah.
people that, have hired me on, whatever, it's now decades later, they're still friends and colleagues, and close friends. I've seen a lot of people in LA lately and connected with people, so it very much is so. So that was the case with this, and I was coming on to a project that was by a couple of friends of mine had just been made directors. So they brought me on the project, and it was called Sweating Bullets. And it was going to be a big release, Disney feature, sort of set in the Old West. And during the time that I was on it, it sort of had three major story iterations. So when they first mentioned me the project, it was going to be sort of like a City Slickers type story. People know that film with Billy Crystal, sort of like an Eastern dude who inherits like his family's cattle ranch out west. And it was going to be like a rom-com, a romantic comedy with the woman who sort of runs the ranch, whatever. So
And it's sort of a fish out of water story,
yes, yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Like the Eastern dude in the Old West and all the fumbling and all the shenanigans that would go with that. So it went from that, then it quickly changed into, I'm not sure if the title was Sweating Bullets then, but then the title became Sweating Bullets, and it was a sort of a cattle coming of age story about a young calf on a cattle drive, and sort of like the high concept, like Bambi in the Old West. That was
Right.
sort of the pitch, Bambi in the Old West. And we worked on that. They actually, it was my first time going on like one of those great big Disney research trips, which was always a dream of mine. I mean, I saw my colleagues go on Rescuers Down Under. They went to, Australia for like a month, all my friends who worked on that, Mike Gabriel and Pichot Hunt, they went to Australia for a month. And then on Lion King, they went to Africa. I used to hear their stories, about going to Africa, for weeks to research that. So it was always a desire of mine to go on one of those great big Disney research trips. And I finally got to go on one, and we went to Wyoming. We flew out of Burbank and went to Cody, Wyoming. And we went for like a week and a half on like an really old Western style cattle drive to do research on the film. And it was amazing. And it was very much like a working cattle ranch. And the cowboys that we met would joke, they would go like some of these trips and cattle drive things are like ridiculous, where they just the cattle know where they're going, and it's like a half mile down the road. They open the gates, they're just running from one place to the other, and you just, ride behind and go yeehaw. This wasn't that. This was like a real working like cattle ranch. And we spent a week and a half, and it was very much like we wore period clothing. It was very much like a throwback thing. We were followed by a chuck wagon. A chuck wagon went with us on the drive with a real like authentic cowboy and amazing cowboy cook and cooking out of the truck wagon. We wore period clothing like muslin and everything, and we slept on sleeping bags. Not even in tents, because I guess they didn't even do that. REI didn't exist that yet to buy the
So you were
tents.
sleeping under the stars.
We lived under the stars in the open plains.
And
So
and let me ask you this. You were riding horses?
we were, and of course, I'm the shortest guy, and they gave me the biggest horse. And the horse was in a bad mood. I guess the people
Oh
before
no.
mistreated it a little bit or weren't
Uh,
good. So this horse was ornery and a bad attitude and sort of threw me at some point, and I like rolled halfway down a ravine and a cliff. But I was okay. And when I came back the final night, I actually wrote like a little song about it that I performed that final night of my horse, and I still remember her name was Lakota Sioux.
Lakota Sioux. Give me a couple verses of the song.
Something that and me, Mickey Rooney. She was kind of loony and me, Mickey Rooney, or something like that. Like the littlest guy, they gave the biggest horse, and just even to get up on that horse, they needed like a forklift to get up on the horse. And anyway, I made it through it. Whatever doesn't kill you make you stronger. So I made it through it. And it was actually wound up being a great thing. And I remember too, like the guy who rode the chuck wagon was this great old cowboy. He was, an older gentleman, but he gave me like some great advice. So I always thought that that was kind of a cool lesson too. It's like if you just stick with it, it wasn't like, I want to go home. I was like, let's stick with it. And he gave me some great advice about like riding and, talking to the horse and staying with the horse and everything. Maybe I give the horse some carrots or sugar cubes, but she sort of warmed up to me and it wound up being great. And we made it all the way through. And I came out with a great song
Nice.
in that
Very
final.
nice.
What else I want to say? So the cattle drive, like I said, it was like a period cattle. It was so cool. We were like your cell phones didn't work because we were like in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
And it was like a week on the open plains in Wyoming. It was
Who was with you?
we
Who
probably a
was?
team of about like 15 people. Mike Gabriel, Michael Giamo, Alice Dewey, um, this whole story crew, like all the story artists, and Christy Maltese, art, and art direction people, and Alan Menken, the great music composer, was
Oh,
actually
so Alan actually went on
Alan.
this, huh?
He went on the, and I gotta say, I always liked that about Alan, him being like humble and hands-on. He wanted to go on that to like, hear the sounds of the open plain.
Yeah.
Alan Menken, who has won 8 Oscars and is like the guy in Disney music, humbled himself and went on that cattle drive. I'm not sure like if I had won 8 Oscars and was worth as much money as Alan Menken, I might have been like, I'll be in a trail. You guys go and ride the horses. I'm going to be in my trailer and I'll follow the cattle drive and I'll be in my trailer with Johan, my masseuse, and my, my private chef who's won 8 Michelin stars to go along with my 8 Oscars, my private chef, and we're going to just follow you. And no, he didn't. He was very much like a humble man who's like, I'm going to go with you on the cattle drive and sleep in sleeping bags under the open plain. So God bless Alan Menken for being a humble man and doing that and going on that drive with us.
Yeah, listen. I'm with you. I will sit there and any day of the week say Alan Menken is an incredibly nice person.
Yes.
Not
Oh, you know
only
what? Yes.
not only immensely talented, but just a very nice person. I interviewed him for a documentary that I made years ago. He has always just been really, really nice.
Yes, a very humble man, a sweet man, and so incredibly talented. I always appreciate too. I'll backtrack too. I'm not sure if I told this story before, but on Beauty and the Beast was the first time I worked with him, and I gotta say, you work on a lot of projects. We worked on a lot of projects where the writers or the musicians sort of mail it in. right? Isn't it the classic case? They're living in another state, they're far away, they're doing the music, and they mail it in. For Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, they wanted to be there in-house. So in Beauty and the Beast, they had offices right across the hallway and were plunking away on the piano, working out those great classic tunes that we all know and remember.
Hmm.
And they wanted to be like there with the, and they were like on every story pitch. I remember, Howard Ashman would give great notes. They both give great notes on your story pitch. Try this, do this. They wanted to be like hands-on and involved. They definitely did not mail it in. Ashman and Menken were very much there, very much involved on every film they worked on. You got to
Yeah.
admire them. That's just
No,
great. Great quality.
look, and by doing that, that's the reason. That's one of the reasons why those
Right.
songs are so timeless and they were huge hits.
Right. That exactly. That's why they're so
Yeah,
great.
yeah,
They're in-house, hands-on, immersive. They were right there with us, and we're in every story meeting too. And that's why the
yeah.
work is so great. They were
So,
not mailing it in.
so you did that research trip. You come back. You guys are working on it. I want you to talk a little bit about what happened on that picture because it started out as Home on the Range,
Yeah.
but there was upheaval.
Yeah. So
As there often is with those
yeah,
films.
it is. Films are messy and,
Yeah,
things never go according to plan. And, I've worked on, half the films I've worked on, I think you can say that you probably too, Dave, like half of them take a long time to sort of find themselves. So it went from City Slickers to Bambi in the Old West
yeah,
to three cows save their ranch, three dairy cows save their ranch. It reminds me, there's a great moment in one of my favorite films, the great Billy Wilder, Sunset Boulevard. William Holden plays Joe Gillis, great screenwriter. We meet him at the top of the film. He's plunking away on his screenplays that nobody wants to buy. And then he meets Gloria Swanson. And then she hires him to write her film, her dream project, her passion project. And when he first meets her, she says to him, "Oh, are you a writer? I have something I'm working on. Are you a writer?" And he goes, "Yeah, I'm a writer. I got my WGA card." And then he says this. He goes, "I've written big films." He goes, "The last film, the last one I wrote was about Okies in the Dust Bowl. But you'd never know it because when it finally reached the screen, the whole thing played on a torpedo boat." And that's very much the story changes a million times, and that's what
right.
happened on that film. Three major story iterations, and with a lot of the hit films too. I could tell you stories about that too. That like Lion King, Shrek were years in the making. It took a long time to find themselves. Toy Story too had very bad or just not reels that were not sort of finding themselves early on. So all these films sort of take a long time to find themselves. So, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. This one, was a tough one. I probably worked on it about 3 years. I worked, so I then, went into storyboarding on it and storyboarded. I storyboarded this character called Lucky Jack. He was sort of like Walter Brennan type classic Western sidekick character. I
Yeah.
I did scene after I did sort of basically the introduction to Lucky Jack scene for 3 years. I boarded that scene over and over again for 3 years. Now it's a little bit of exaggeration because I did work on other scenes in between, but just to show like it, it's not for animation storyboarding. It's not for sprinters. It's for like marathon runners. And I've done both in my life. It's you got to be in it for the long haul, and you got to just like keep reinventing, keep going, keep getting off the canvas again and again.
And also, I want to ask you because of the kind of notes you get, the kind of changes that happen on a film, some people can get disheartened by that, but you have to have a thick skin.
Yeah, definitely. You just got to have, resilience, I think is one of the most important
Yeah.
qualities to have. I have a quote on my wall I look at every day from Calvin Coolidge about persistence, and the about how that is more important than anything. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent, that they're just the most important things. And definitely in animation and working on these films, as you know, Dave, there you got to be in it for the long haul. They're 2, 3, 4 years in the making. And sometimes they can take a long time to sort of get on their feet and find themselves.
And I think again, I think it's important to talk about how developing that thick skin early on and making sure you have that armor because getting notes and getting knocked down and having directors or a producer or an executive say they don't like something you did, you can't take it personally,
Yes, exactly.
because
Very
they're not attacking you personally.
right.
They're attacking an idea, or they're giving you a note on an idea that you've boarded, and so this idea of so many artists, especially young artists, when they do something, they think it's the greatest thing in the world, and they get incensed sometimes when you give them notes.
Yeah, that's there's a lot
A year ago, I was in Armenia, and a young animator showed me some work he was doing, and you could tell from his disposition, he was all puffed up. He thought it was great. And I looked at it and I gave him some notes that, you can improve on this and improve on that. And he was somewhat incensed by that, and you know what I'm talking about, Robert, because you've
yes.
experienced it as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of wisdom in what you're saying, Dave, and that you can't take it personally.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of the job. It's like part of the job description is you're going to get nothing's going to be. They always say the first pass of anything is garbage. Writing is rewriting, boarding is reboarding, and there's something sort of special and magical about that reinvention too. Because I've seen that happen like a million times in a million pitches. You pitch stuff you think is the greatest thing in the world, just like that guy, and then it gets shot down or whatever. Then you get notes about how to redo it and you're like reluctant to do it, but there's something about like in the reinventing of it, but it always comes back stronger. And then like you can look back and go, you know what, I didn't like doing that, but it's better now. This new version of it I actually like better. I couldn't see it, I was too close to it, I was too involved. So sort of the lesson of that is sort of to like not get too attached to your work, to be open to notes and to let go. With notes too, I've worked on a lot of stuff. Here's like when you get notes, here's my sort of litmus test. When you can pitch the idea to different people, when people are earmarking the same troubled area, that's where you got to rework it. You might not always want to take their suggestion, or they might not have the best solution, but when people earmark an area, that area is not working, you got to go back into that. That's when you got to go back into it.
And that's why it's important to show your work to a lot of different people, because you start to those similar notes may start to bubble up with different people, and like you said, that's the area you got to go look at. You can't just sort of slough off a note. If you're getting that note two or three times, you better darn well go in and address it. And one other thing I want to mention, there's a great quote from Ernest Hemingway, the
Mm.
Nobel Prize winning writer. Ernest Hemingway famously said, your first draft is always shit. Right?
That's right. He knew a thing or two about writing, and that's very true.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, about like students reluctant to take notes, you gotta like do that early on. When I teach at CalArts, like critiques are a big part of it, and sometimes the students aren't used to that, or if they're a new art student. But that's just part of it, to be able to put your stuff on the wall, not take it personally, to be able to distance yourself from it, and to get notes from your teachers, or if it's appropriate, the classmates too. And that's when it's going to get better. There is like a reluctance to that sometimes um, with animators and artists. I think I told the story before that one of the reasons that Glenn Keane, I got help on my second year film from him at CalArts, even though he wasn't my direct teacher, is I walked into the design room and he's sitting there alone. Glenn Keane, the
Mhm.
greatest like animator, one of the greatest of all time, is sitting there. In other words, he was supposed to be teaching, giving, consulting with the students in their films, but no one wanted to take him up on that. That's pretty unbelievable to think of now. But that's when I walked up to him and said, "Hey, Glenn, I know I'm not in your class, but I'm a, underclassman, but could I get your feedback?" So hard to believe that anyone would pass on getting input on their animation from Glenn Keane. Another time I was teaching, I'll tell you another story along those lines. Another time was when I was teaching up at CalArts, I brought in an editor from Disney. He worked at Disney all day. I'd worked with him like on Beauty and the Beast, and I convinced him to come up and CalArts and guest speak to my class and to visit my class. Tony was a great editor at Disney, so I brought him up. He gave a little talk, about editing to my students in my story class, and then I was like, okay, who wants Tony to look at their films and get some input on your editing and how your animatic is cut? Crickets. Nobody wanted input. was like, what? Are you kidding me? This guy, he just worked at Disney all day. He's worked on Beauty and the Beast. He's worked on big films. He will give you feedback and edit on your films. It was, I like had to go to like some of my students and go, hey, you got to take this guy up on that. He came all the way from Disney, but you want
Do,
his input.
do you think it was that they were just intimidated?
It could be there is like because I see that in my own work sometimes there's something about sort of like wanting to hold it close to you when it's actually probably your instinct is to do that, but the instinct should be the opposite, should be to show it out there, to show it to other people. You really don't know what you have. If you have an idea for a film, you want to pitch it to like five or six people. You want to, get it out there or whatever. You don't know what you have.
Yeah.
You could probably back me up on this, Dave, that, sometimes you think you did something and you think, oh, this is the greatest idea in the world. Wait till people see this. This is just amazing. And you show it to people and they're like, I've seen that before. It's not so great. And then another idea, which you didn't think that highly of, I just came up with this, last night, and you pitch it to people like, oh, that's amazing. That's gold right there. So as artists, I think we're notoriously not always the best judges of our own talent. That's why it's good to put it out there and get feedback early on.
Yeah. No, I look, well, as you know, I've written a lot of books. I put my manuscripts out to, five, six people early on. I want to get the feedback. I want to see if I'm hearing similar notes from different people that aren't
Mm.
talking to one another. And most of I shouldn't say most, all of my books, I've rewritten
Yeah.
numerous times, and I've moved stuff around, and it always gets stronger.
Yeah. It
Always.
always comes back stronger. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's wisdom in that, like putting it out to a few people. And like you said, when they earmark the same area, when they point to the same problem areas, that's when you know you got problems in that area. You got to go back into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So talk a little bit more about Home on the Range, because you were working in the story department. You come in one day and there's new directors.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, in animation, and we've seen this, I'm sure, Dave, time and time again.
Oh yeah.
All of my analogies are two things. They're either in sports or cooking and food. So this is a sports analogy. When things aren't working well in baseball or football, what do they do? What do they do in baseball? The team's on a losing skid, they fire the manager. It's just always their head
Or the
is
coach, right? The manager or the coach.
how many NFL head coaches have already lost their job mid-season this
Right.
year? Because
Yes.
patience is, and it's the first thing that they always do. So if you're an NFL head coach, a Major League Baseball manager, or a Disney director, you're never that far from the chopping block, unfortunately. If
Right.
things go wrong, you're always going to be, take the blame and take the hit. So that's what happened on that film. They brought in new directors and a whole different, completely different story tack. The original director, their vision was very much like a classic Disney Western, with a coming of age story, sort of a classic Disney storytelling. This one was very different take, much more sort of comic, lighthearted, was sort of more like a broad comedy.
Yeah, yeah. And when that happened, did the story team stay reasonably intact, or how did it change?
Yeah, I mean,
Because
we're pretty good. It was the
did the
same.
new directors, by the way, come from the story department, or
Yes, I mean, I guess I can say, John Sanford and Will Finn. Will was a great, Disney animator. John was a great story guy from the story
yeah.
department. And they just had a different, take on the film and a different, broad comic take on it. And so it played, as a comedy.
Now, did you guys who were in the story department, or people on that were early on production, did you see it coming, or did it just happen?
Yeah, yeah, you could tell, like I said, that it was sort of having trouble sort of finding itself in that,
Yeah.
to get, so went through many, animatics and many versions. And yeah, I would say that it was, you know, uh, it's debatable too. A classic Disney film about the Old West, I don't think is a bad territory to be in. And the original directors, I liked, their take on it a lot too.
Yeah.
But what John and Will did with it, was great too. I think they're both are good story tacks, and there's no like wrong
No, no,
story.
no.
Different
I'm
take.
just trying to understand,
Yeah.
how you guys felt, because did you walk in one day and it was a complete shock to you, or did you get an inkling that something was going to change?
Yeah, I guess maybe we got an inkling that,
Yeah,
something was sort of up and that, but I mean it's always, a shock when that happens. But, as an artist, you're resilient and we went back, we rolled up our
yeah,
sleeves, and went right back to work. And it wasn't like the story crew remained the same and everything. It was just like going to be a different story direction. We got on board in that
yeah.
and did what
A-
we did with it.
and there was a lot of work ahead of you because you had to
Yeah, because now the
basically,
time, as you've seen this happen a lot, now
yeah,
you're out of time and you're out of money. Now it's like, the heat
yeah,
is on to
yeah,
get it out into faster. And that's happened on Beauty and the Beast, on Lion
yeah.
King. It's happened on a
Yeah,
lot.
but I do say though that one of the games they play at the studios is when a film is being developed and they've spent a lot of money on it and then they sort of change direction, they typically change the name of it and essentially everything under the old name is a write-off and everything under the new name going forward is the actual budget you know what I
Oh,
mean?
that's funny.
So
That's how they
they're
really
doing some creative accounting, you know?
right. So Sweating Bullets was out and Home on the Range is in. I was never that crazy about the title, Home on the Range.
Yeah,
I thought it might be about like kitchen appliances or something.
yeah, yeah,
Um, so anyways, yeah, right. I thought Sweating Bullets was kind of a cooler title, more unique. But
yeah.
anyway, it was a did the story change, so you couldn't keep the same title, obviously,
Right, right,
for any
right.
reasons.
Yeah.
The
So
other
you
thing,
so you worked on that and the movie came out and if I remember correctly, it performed okay.
yeah, it did okay. It sort of
Yeah,
had, its audience and still has its
yeah.
fans and everything. One more thing I was going to say about that too. It introduced us to the Santa Clarita Cowboy Festival, music and cowboy
Oh
festival.
yeah, yeah. It used to be called the Santa Clarita Poetry
Oh,
Festival,
Cowboy
Cowboy Poetry
and
Festival.
festival, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
we went to that as a group. We went like 15
yeah.
of us went,
Uh-huh.
and and we recruited like one of the yodelers from that, like Sourdough Slim.
Oh, is that right?
We saw him perform and like talked to him afterwards or whatever. And the whole aspect that the villain Alameda Slim would yodel and everything.
Yeah,
So we sort of, recruited him out of the Cowboy Festival. And I got to say, like I've gone to it when I've lived there, I've gone to it like every year since, and it's a great event. It used to be at Melody Ranch, but I
yes.
guess they're renting it out for something now. So now it's in a Hart Park area. But
Yeah.
it's a great thing, and it's one of the great local things there in Santa Clarita.
Yeah, and the Cowboy Walk of Fame also.
The cowboy one,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Great. I love it. I love that. And the
yeah,
Hart Park is a great thing too.
yeah.
I always take my students there. Our drawing teacher, Louis Goodell, used to take us there to draw in Hart Park, to draw the
Nice.
bison. I just
The-
did that with my CalArts student to sort of return the favor
Oh, nice.
last May when I was there.
Yeah.
We did our final day. We went up, we hiked up the hill, and we drew the bison, which were donated by Walt Disney. I believe
Yes. Yeah.
there's a plaque there. Like he
Yeah.
did the bison in
The
there.
the original, yeah, the
The original
original
one, and now we have like the great 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 grand
yeah, yeah,
father
whatever
grandson
descendants
bison.
of those original ones. Yeah. And another interesting thing, Hart Park is the last LA County park within the city of Santa Clarita, and the county has just deeded the park over to the city of Santa Clarita.
Oh, I heard that there
So
was going to
yeah,
be
so
wow,
Hart Park is now part of the park system in the city of Santa Clarita.
wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. It's still a great place. It's still a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
place to go and visit. It's just fantastic
A lot
and
of
has a lot
history.
of history to it, right? So after that, after that second stint at Disney, then I went and again being hired by friends and everything, I go to Disney Toons. I had a friend, Brad Raymond, who had been made director of Lion King 1.5.
Okay.
So he brought me over and having worked on the first one too, he wanted me to work on it, and I boarded on that and worked on that. And he had I think he had Roger Allers would like consult on it and everything too. And they tried to, keep it faithful to the original. So I worked on that. And then I worked on a whole bunch of films at Disney Toons. I worked on the Tinkerbell movies. I worked on like two or three of the Tinkerbell films, including that original one with Brad Raymond. Worked with
Bambi 2,
Bambi
Brother
2, I
Bear
worked on.
2.
Brother Bear
Yeah,
2, just a whole bunch of the sequels. Worked with Kevin Lima on Jungle Book 2.
yeah.
And
And did you leave to go back over to DreamWorks? Because I'm sitting here looking and it's like Bambi 2, Brother Bear 2, Tinkerbell, Pixie Hollow Games, and then all of a sudden the Penguins of Madagascar.
No, that was just like a brief TV gig that I worked on
Okay.
through a friend of mine from Disney Toons, from Nick.
Oh, was it a freelance gig, or were you still
Yeah, it was
working
just
at
like a freelance
Disney?
gig. I
Yeah,
didn't work
yeah.
in-house
I
on
gotcha. Yeah,
right. And again, it was a Disney connection. It was Nick Philippi, whom I worked with on as a storyboard artist on those Disney Toons films, is going over there and directing that. So, but yeah, that was just a brief gig.
And how was it for you working on some of those sequels?
It
Was it
was
just
fun. I like, yeah.
another job?
Yeah, I was glad to, be working in the industry
Yeah,
and be employed. And again, it's always about friends and relationships. And it with often the case on those, I knew Brian Pimentel and Ben Gluck and all Brad Raymond, Kevin Lima,
yeah,
I knew the people I was working with.
sure.
So that was nice. So again, it always comes down to relationships and everything. And
Yeah.
still, it was all in that Flower Street area too. Which
Yeah,
was.
well, the
Yeah,
Disney Toon Studios had a very nice building
yeah, they did. They did.
with its own commissary and
With an Italian chef that was like better than anybody on the main line.
yeah,
I
yeah,
remember that. Like you'd go to lunch they had like a really like great Italian chef in that Disney Toons building. It's like people would leave the main lot and go there for lunch.
yeah.
So after that, I was always teaching at CalArts. I shouldn't say always, but like shortly after I left CalArts as a student in 1988, they brought me back like in 1990 as a teacher. And I taught my first class in 1990.
So,
Yeah.
I think that this is actually a good place to break
Okay.
because I'd like to come back next week and just focus on sort of your teaching aspect and because you're still doing that. And you kind of segued out of working day to day on films to start teaching full time at some point. So can we do that? Can we pick it up when your first teaching class and talk about that in the next episode?
Absolutely, Dave. That sounds like a great plan.
All right. So Robert, thank you again for being on the Skull Rock podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks very much for having me, Dave. Thank you.
Hi, this is Dan Jupe, and you're listening to the Skull Rock Podcast.
And there you have it. Part 3 of our interview with Robert Lence. But wait, there's more. Next week, we were going to wrap things up on this epic 4-part series with story artist Robert Lence right here on Skull Rock Podcast. Don't forget, if you love what you heard, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our show everywhere you get podcasts, including YouTube. Be sure to give us a follow on X, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky. We're everywhere. And check out there at skullrockpodcast.com. You can also email Dave or myself. We'd love to hear from you, and we'll discuss your email and your notes in an upcoming episode. Dave or Aljon at skullrockpodcast.com.
I want to remind our listeners my Tunes Behind the Tunes show is on Sirius XM, Disney Hits, channel 133. You can also check out a lot of my books at theoldmillpress.com, including my latest book, Find Your Happy Place, the 8-Step Guide to Boosting Your Creativity Through a Personal Retreat, winner of a gold medal at the Fire Book Awards in Texas. And folks, if you're looking to make a change for the coming year, check out that book, Find Your Happy Place. You can also go to davidbossert.com. There's all kinds of free stuff there. And with that, Aljon, I'm going to say go out and have a fantastic week. Go out, have a fantastic week, everybody. Be kind to one another, and we'll see you back here next Monday, right here on the Skull Rock Podcast.
If you're looking to take your next Disney vacation and want it as stress-free as possible, I encourage you to reach out to my wife, Kristen, with themeparksandcruises@gmail.com. Kristen, what is this week's travel deal?
Well, right now, if you are looking to enjoy the Epcot Flower and Garden Festival, which is just around the corner, I have the perfect deal for you. Right now, you can save up to 25% on rooms at select Disney Resort hotels. That's going to be from now through April 30th. If you are staying at the deluxe or deluxe villa resorts, that's where you're going to see the 25%. If you're staying at moderates, you're going to see more of the 20% and 15% at your value resorts. And again, this does have limitations to it, of course. So, and you can stay a minimum of 1 night, or you can stay up to 14 nights. So you can enjoy 2 weeks at 25% off if you want to. Okay, if you are looking to book that deal or any other ones for Walt Disney World, Disneyland, any of the cruise lines, whether it be those big ocean boats or the little river cruises, I can do all of that. You just contact me at themeparksandcruises@gmail.com.